And finally, the moment that all of you have been anxiously waiting for, the man of the moment, America's success guru, and of course, our spiritual friend and guide this evening. Let's hear it very specially, with all your noise out here in Crossword, for Mr. Jack Canfield. Welcome to the city of Mumbai, sir.
The first time I was here, I have to tell a story. I was in the Taj Mahal Hotel. We got in around 11:30, 12 o'clock at night. I was totally jet lagged, but I couldn't sleep. So I turned on the television and I started watching a movie. And it was a very difficult movie. People were living in the desert kind of area of India. It was all dry, and it was a what do you call it, a drought, and the crops weren't coming, and families were in conflict. And then all of a sudden, 300 people are dancing and singing in the middle of this movie. And I went, what the heck is this? It was the first Bollywood movie I'd ever seen. And I loved it. I thought it was really fun, but it was totally new to me. So it's fun to be back and be sitting next to two people who've been in that world. So I love India because you talk about, some people often refer to me as a very spiritual person, and much of that comes from my study and practice of some of the different practices that come from India. I have sat in 10-day Buddhist meditation retreats. I have done Kundalini Yoga with some Sikh teachers. I have chanted with Hindus and become ecstatic in doing that. And I have just, I've studied, what's the word? Gosh, I can't think of it. The Sufis, with Islam. So, I mean, every religion has a mystical arm. And that's always the part that I'm attracted to, the spirituality more than the religious dogma. And so to be back here is just to be steeped in that energetic, and I'm really happy to be here. I'll tell you a couple of things, and I'll try to be inspirational since everyone's kind of expecting that. And then we'll do a little Q&A, and then I'll be glad to sign some of your books. But I would like to tell you how Chicken Soup for the Soul got started, for starters. I was a speaker. I started out as a high school teacher, and I very quickly became aware that my students were really on the edge of their seats whenever I told a story. And whenever I talk about history, they'd kind of fall asleep. Then I'd tell a story, they'd be like this. So I became very aware of the power of stories. And I started collecting stories. I was teaching in an all-black inner-city high school in Chicago, the kind you see in movies where there's gang members and things like that. And I started collecting stories of black people who'd made it. Because a lot of these kids didn't feel they could come from that environment and be successful. And I noticed whenever I would share those stories, they would be very inspired, get motivated. I quickly became more interested in how to motivate kids than I was in teaching history. And I started doing workshops for teachers because I was good at it, and I started training them. And then one day I was doing a workshop for a school, and this woman said, my husband's company needs you to come and do what you do. I said, I don't do corporate work. The only corporation I ever worked in, I was a floor sweeper in the summer in a General Electric plant that made refrigerator motors. And I was kind of afraid of corporate people. And she said, they're just big kids in suits. Don't worry about them. So I went and did that, and that kind of morphed into the work I do now. I was fortunate enough, when I was in my, I think it was 24 or 5, I met a man named W. Clement Stone. And he was worth $600 million in 1968. So he'd be a billionaire by today's inflation standards. And he took me under his wing and he started teaching me how to be successful, like he had been. He never went to college. He started an insurance company for $10,000 and built it up into an empire. He also was the publisher of Success magazine, and he really understood success. And so I started going around teaching these seminars using stories to inspire people. And one day somebody said, that story you told about the Girl Scout who sold 3,000, think about this, 3,128 boxes of Girl Scout cookies in 1 year. And so she was in the Guinness Book of World Records. Before she retired, she sold over 31,000 boxes of Girl Scout cookies. And when she was 12 years old, she wrote a book. It may have actually been sold in this bookstore many years ago, called The Cookie Kid. And it said how to sell more cookies, computers, condos, and Cadillacs, and anything else that starts with the letter C. It was kind of a joke. But she became a motivational speaker at the age of 14 years old. And it was interesting how she came to become such a great cookie salesperson. She was, her mother was a Puerto Rican, and she was a waitress in a restaurant. They were not very wealthy. And her mother was working really hard and saving all her money to send little Marquita to school. She wanted her to be able to go to college and get an education and have a life that was beyond what she had. And she came to her one day and she said, Marquita, I have two dreams. One dream is I want you to be able to go to school and get a better education than your mother had. My second dream is I would like to travel around the world. I've always wanted to go around the world and see places. I'm willing to give up my dream of traveling and send you to college if when you get the kind of job a college graduate can get and make the money they make, you'd be willing to send me around the world at some point. And so she said, deal. She was 11 years old. What did she know? Why not? That year, the Girl Scouts came out with a contest. They raised money by selling cookies. I don't know if they do that here, but in America they do. And it said, the Girl Scout who sells the most cookies will win a trip for two around the world. So Marquita thought, I can get rid of this commitment when I'm 11 by selling more Girl Scout cookies than anybody winning this trip. So she would knock on the doors. Most Girl Scouts in America would go. People would answer the door. They'd say, we're on our annual cookie drive. Would you like to buy some cookies? Even worse, they'd say, you don't want to buy any cookies, do you? And the answer was like, no. This was Marquita. Hi, you can see by my uniform, I'm a Girl Scout. We're having our annual cookie sale, and I have a dream I want to tell you about. My mom wants to go around the world really bad, and I love my mother. And my dream is to sell more cookies than any girl in this country, and therefore provide my mother with her dream. How many boxes of cookies will you buy to support me in my dream? And people would go like, well, is 10 enough? You know? And so her first year, she broke the record and sold 1,328 boxes of Girl Scout cookies. 3 years later, she was so successful at this that they asked her to be a keynote speaker at the age of 14 to people that were salespeople that had sold over $1 million worth of commissionable life insurance. In other words, they had made $1 million that year. It's called the $1 Million Roundtable. So here's this 14-year-old girl speaking to 1,000 people in Radio City Music Hall in New York. And at the end of her talk, she says, and by the way, before you leave today, I'd like you to do a thing for me. Reach under your chair, you'll find a little card, little index card, white card. I'd like you to write a number between 5 and 10 on that card. Everyone wrote a number, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then she said, as you leave in the lobby, that's the number of boxes of Girl Scout cookies I want you to buy today before you leave. She sold over 7,000 boxes of Girl Scout cookies that day. And the principle of this story is you have to be willing to ask. So many of us are afraid to ask. We're afraid of rejection. And what I say to people, because when we came up with the chicken soup for the soul book, and I'll tell you how we got the title in just a minute because it's an interesting story. We went to the publishers and we said, will you publish our book? And we went to New York. 22 publishers told us no over a 3-day period. Said, it's a stupid title. Nobody reads short stories. Go away. Took us 1 year and 6 months, so 18 months, with 144 publishers telling us no before we got a yes.